Officials ID'd the victim as Austin Metcalf, an 11th grader who ran track and played high school football in Frisco, Texas.
His brother was holding on to him, trying to make it stop bleeding, and he died in his brother's arms.
You're sitting in court when the indictment is read aloud, the words slicing through the silence like a blade. First-degree murder. Gasps ripple across the gallery as the charges against Karmelo Anthony's parents are made official. But what shocks the courtroom even more is the evidence tied to the indictment. A staggering $70,000 cash withdrawal, traced directly to the days surrounding the murder. According to prosecutors, financial records show the withdrawal was made in multiple transactions at different ATMs, each one just under the reporting threshold designed to flag suspicious activity. Investigators allege this wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate structuring, an attempt to avoid detection while moving large sums of cash. The money, they argue, was used to fund critical steps connected to the crime, though they have not yet detailed exactly how. Inside the courtroom, the presentation of evidence is methodical. Screens display bank logs, ATM surveillance stills, and timestamps that align with key points in the murder timeline. Prosecutors stress that the financial trail cannot be ignored. Money leaves a fingerprint, one attorney states, locking eyes with the jury, and this fingerprint leads directly to the defendants. The defense pushes back immediately, arguing that the withdrawals reflect ordinary family expenses and were being exaggerated to strengthen a weak case. They suggest that no direct link between the cash and the crime has been proven, framing the transactions as circumstantial at best. Still, the optics of the numbers, tens of thousands drained in rapid succession, land heavily with those watching. Outside, the revelation dominates headlines. $70,000 withdrawal tied to murder case, one outlet writes. While social media buzzes with theories about where the cash went, some speculate it was meant to pay off accomplices or silence potential witnesses, while others believe it was an attempt to hide assets before investigators closed in. And now people are asking, is this financial trail the missing link prosecutors needed to solidify their case? Or will the defense succeed in framing it as nothing more than coincidence? If you were on that jury, would $70,000 in unexplained withdrawals be enough to sway you? You're hearing the gavel strike again as the prosecution calls its first witness of the day, a forensic accountant tasked with breaking down the suspicious trail of money. The atmosphere is tense, every eye locked on the screen as spreadsheets and transaction logs flicker into view. The witness explains that the $70,000 wasn't pulled in a single lump sum. Instead, it was withdrawn in a series of smaller increments, spread across different machines over several days. Each transaction came in just under $10,000, a pattern investigators describe as structuring, a red flag often seen in cases where individuals are trying to avoid mandatory bank reporting requirements. The timing of these withdrawals is what prosecutors highlight most, many of them occurring within hours of key developments in the murder investigation. To support their claim, the prosecution presents ATM security footage. Grainy stills allegedly show Karmelo Anthony's father making several late-night withdrawals, his hood pulled up, his expression tense. Another clip, taken days later, appears to capture his mother completing a similar transaction at a different location. Prosecutors argue that this pattern wasn't just unusual, it was deliberate coordination between the two. The defense quickly objects, arguing that no evidence ties the cash directly to the crime. They insist the family had legitimate reasons for accessing large amounts of money, pointing to legal fees and personal expenses mounting at the time. One attorney states firmly, cash withdrawals are not murder weapons. They are being twisted into a narrative. Still, the damage is visible. Jurors lean forward, pens scribbling furiously, as the prosecution stresses that these financial movements occurred at a time when most people would be seeking transparency, not secrecy. Outside the courthouse, reporters seize on the narrative, branding it the $70,000 trail. Social media buzzes with speculation, with some users insisting the withdrawals must have been used to pay someone off. And now the question lingers. Does the pattern itself prove guilt? Or could the withdrawals truly have been nothing more than desperate, panicked attempts to hold a family together under pressure? If you were in that courtroom, would the footage convince you or leave you with doubt? You're leaning forward in your seat as the prosecution unveils what they call the critical connection. Bank logs from the $70,000 withdrawal are now paired with testimony from investigators who tracked where the cash surfaced afterward. According to their findings, portions of the money were traced to prepaid debit cards and money orders, both purchased in the days immediately following the crime. One investigator testifies that the prepaid cards were used to pay for untraceable rideshare trips and hotel rooms, locations that, prosecutors allege, line up with movements of key witnesses who later changed their stories. Another portion of the cash was reportedly deposited into a relative's account, raising further suspicion about whether the family attempted to hide or redistribute funds to avoid seizure. The prosecution underscores the timeline once more, projecting a chart that links each major withdrawal with moments in the murder investigation, the night of the crime, the day after questioning, and even hours before a key witness recanted their earlier statement. This isn't coincidence, the lead prosecutor insists. This is coordination. The defense fires back quickly, calling the evidence speculative. They argue that prepaid cards and money orders are common financial tools, and that linking them to witness tampering is an assumption, not a fact. The state is painting shadows as if they were proof, one defense lawyer declares, urging the jury to focus only on what is undeniably proven. Federal investigator who specializes in financial crimes. His demeanor is calm, methodical, but the evidence he presents ratchets the tension higher than ever. On the screen behind him is a map, tracing a web of cash flow tied directly to the $70,000 withdrawal. According to his report, a portion of the money was funneled through multiple accounts opened under shell names. Several of those accounts, investigators allege, were created just weeks before the murder. The federal agent points to one example, a $9,800 deposit made into an account later linked to a corporation registered at a vacant office building. This was not an accident, he tells the jury. This was a deliberate effort to conceal where the money was going. The prosecution builds on that, suggesting the withdrawals and transfers were designed to cover payments connected to the crime, either to secure silence or to obstruct justice. The phrase financial trail of deception is repeated several times as charts and exhibits are displayed in front of the jury. Defense attorneys immediately push back, insisting the government is leaning on paper theories without showing any direct link between the withdrawals and an act of violence. One lawyer raises his voice, declaring, "They are asking you to believe that numbers on a spreadsheet are evidence of murder." The defense emphasizes that no witness has testified to receiving the money, and no document directly names the parents as orchestrators of a payoff. Still, the jury remains focused, eyes flicking between the agent's steady testimony and the stacks of paperwork piling up on the prosecution's table. The quiet weight of the evidence seems to settle over the room. Outside the courthouse, the story spreads even faster. News outlets frame the revelation as proof of hidden money, while online debates explode with theories about who may have been paid and why. And now the central question hangs heavier than before. Does a hidden financial network amount to undeniable proof of murder, or is it just a trail of suspicion that stops short of certainty? If you were deciding, would the secrecy alone convince you, or would you still wait for the final piece? You're watching the courtroom projector flicker to life again, this time displaying a stack of ATM surveillance photos side by side. The images show late-night withdrawals, blurred but clear enough to recognize Karmelo Anthony's parents at separate machines across town. Prosecutors argue the split locations weren't random, they were coordinated, part of an effort to move large sums of cash without drawing attention. The lead prosecutor's tone sharpens as he narrates the evidence. They didn't just withdraw money, he says. They withdrew silence. They withdrew loyalty. He points to timestamps that align with witness testimony, claiming that payments made in cash coincided with sudden changes in statements during the murder investigation. The courtroom sits in silence, the only sound the turning of pages as jurors study the binder handed to them. The defense counters, insisting that the photos prove nothing beyond the fact that the couple accessed their own accounts. Their attorney stresses that correlation does not equal causation, adding, "There is no evidence any of this cash ever changed hands with a witness, or that it has anything to do with this crime." He leans on the uncertainty, telling jurors they're being shown speculation dressed up as fact. But outside the courthouse, speculation is all that matters. The release of the ATM stills dominates headlines. Parents caught on camera withdrawing $70K before murder indictment. Social media erupts with side-by-side collages, users drawing their own conclusions about guilt before the trial is even over. For many, the visuals hit harder than the spreadsheet. The sight of stacks of cash being pulled in the dead of night feels like a story of its own. And now the question gripping the public mirrors the one confronting the jury. Do images of secretive behavior, tied so closely to the murder timeline, carry the weight of guilt? Or are they just shadows being mistaken for proof? If you were staring at those photos, would you see coincidence or conspiracy? You're sitting in court when the next piece of evidence lands with a thud, a stack of printed text messages seized from the Anthony family's phones. Prosecutors argue these messages show intent, connecting the $70,000 in withdrawals to conversations about keeping things quiet and making sure no one talks. One highlighted exchange, allegedly between Karmelo's father and an unnamed contact, reads, "Move the rest tonight. We can't risk them freezing it if someone flips." The prosecution builds its case carefully, pairing the texts with bank records to show how the timing overlaps. Large cash movements appear within hours of messages referencing witnesses and upcoming hearings. Another exchange, prosecutors note, includes Karmelo's mother reminding someone to check the bags before Friday, a phrase investigators interpret as a coded reference to money deliveries. Defense attorneys immediately object, calling the messages ambiguous and taken out of context. They argue phrases like, "keep it quiet," could refer to family privacy or unrelated disputes, not a conspiracy tied to murder. One lawyer rises sharply, insisting, "The state is asking you to assume intent without proof. These words are vague, and they can mean anything." Still, the combination of the texts and the financial records strikes a chord in the room. Jurors lean closer as the prosecution highlights how the withdrawals, the prepaid cards, and now the private messages all converge on the same timeline. The case no longer looks like a handful of suspicious transactions. It's being painted as a coordinated effort to obstruct justice. Outside, the impact is immediate. News outlets blast the headline, "Explosive texts link 70K withdrawal to murder case." Online, hashtags trend within the hour, with users debating whether the messages are a smoking gun or simply courtroom theater. And now the critical question hangs heavy. When vague words meet suspicious money trails, do they add up to guilt? Or is the interpretation itself a stretch too far? If you were sitting in that jury box, would the text convince you, or would you demand more before making up your mind? You're watching the judge glance over the courtroom one final time, his expression firm as he calls for order. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and heated arguments, the case against Karmelo Anthony's parents has reached its breaking point. The indictment for first-degree murder stands, strengthened by the revelations of a $70,000 withdrawal, alleged structuring of funds, and text messages that prosecutors claim show intent to silence witnesses. The gallery is silent, but the tension is palpable. Jurors sit rigid in their chairs, pens still in hand, reflecting the gravity of what they've been asked to weigh. On the defense side, the family remains motionless, avoiding eye contact as the judge reminds both parties that the trial will continue under the full weight of a first-degree murder charge. Outside the courthouse, the scene is electric. News vans line the streets, anchors delivering live coverage as protesters and supporters clash on the steps. Some hold signs demanding justice for Austin Metcalf, chanting that the financial trail proves guilt beyond doubt. Others argue the state is twisting ordinary transactions into a murder narrative, insisting the case is built on speculation. Across social media, the story dominates timelines. Clips of the ATM footage, screenshots of the leaked texts, and charts mapping the withdrawals circulate at lightning speed. Hashtags trend nationwide, framing the trial as not just a local case, but a national spectacle. Commentators call it one of the most dramatic financial trails ever introduced in a murder indictment. For prosecutors, the narrative is clear. The money tells the story. For the defense, the battle now is to break that link before a jury sees it as conclusive. And for the public, the question has become far bigger than one family or one crime. Because when large sums of money surface in the shadow of a murder case, does the trail reveal the truth? Or does it simply raise more questions than it answers? If you were deciding, would the $70,000